Thank you very much. I didn't finish it, actually, at the university, because I thought it was a neat idea to start my master's degree, which I always wanted to get, and write a book for my master thesis, turn my master thesis into a book. Turns out that writing a book is far easier than doing the studies and then changing. So here we are with The New Oil, which is the title of my book. But before we started, I wanted to start off this presentation with a sentence, "Let's move markets," but "show me the money" is actually far better than that, because that's what it means. And there was another sentence that you have in your company logo that's "technology that matters." And I wanted to start off with that, because that's an interesting sentence, because it encompasses technology and business, because technology is the technology and the business is what matters. So I'm going to try to translate technology into making it matter. And that's what my presentation is going to be about for the next 30 minutes. So we're here about technology. And there's an interesting thing about technology, because we tend to look at technology as something that creates data. And data is the result of technology. Who of you, and you can pick out your red card if you think that technology is the result, or sorry, if the data is the result of technology, who of you thinks the data is actually part of it? So green if you think data is part of it, and red if you think that data is the result of technology. I only see green cards. Is there any? Oh, there are some people with red cards. You're at the wrong end of the stick at this presentation. Thank you. Because if you think that data is part of the technology, then that means that Nedap is actually in the business of making data and making business models based on data. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about. So when we think of data, we think of one company in particular. Which one? Google. And the other one? Facebook. So Facebook is the one that drew this image. And this is an interesting image, because to me, it epitomizes how you can paint the world with data. This is a picture that was released a couple of months ago by Facebook, and it's a graph. It's not a map. There is no map in this image. It's a graph on geolocations between friendships. So if you have a friendship if you live in New York and you have a friend in Amsterdam, it will put two white dots in the picture and then connect them with a blue line. And if you put all of the friendship and relationships of Facebook on a visual like this, you will literally draw the world. That's what they did. And that's what I found very interesting, because Facebook can actually draw the world with data, with the data that they have. So we're here to discuss big data. But if you look at big data, there's actually two things that you can relate to when you speak about big data. One is technology. Who of you would first think about technology in a company like this? If I say big data, who of you would refer to a particular technology? I saw it. I figured you would be the first to say technology matters. So, who would you think that it was a modus operandi, a way of working? Big data. Oh, as a consultant, this is heaven. There's a lot of work to be done here. So let's first look at technology. If we hear the words big data, most people that have a little bit of insight into the topic will refer to something called Hadoop. Hadoop is a technology that can actually process big data in a big way. And it was invented by Google and Facebook, or at least two technologies, MapReduce and Hadoop, are two technologies that were invented by the two big companies to process vast amount of data very quickly so that they can come up with these neat analytics and neat maps. And they were not the only ones. There are about a couple of hundred companies in the world that have jumped on the big data bandwagon and have started the hype to make sure that lots of companies would spend money on software and supporting systems to do something with big data. And the interesting thing is that they don't tell their customers what they can actually do with all that big data. It's just that they need big software to process it and expensive licenses. So there's a whole ecosystem that now exists around big data. But far more interesting is the big data landscape of business. Big data as a method of working or as a new product and service, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about. Any one of you know what this is? Hey, who are the technology people in here? Anyone from technology? Anyone? I know you are. You asked the interesting question, but anyone in the business end? What do you do? You're all in HR. It's an oil well. Very good. It's called a plunger lifter. It's something that pumps up oil. We know it as a ja knikker, except this one shakes no. But it doesn't. It goes up and down, and it gets oil from the ground. And it's from a company called ConocoPhillips. And they don't have one or two in the field like we're used to see in Holland. They have 4,500 in a single field. And these things pump up oil, and they have a sensor. And the sensor measures two things once every day. It measures whether this thing is still working, and it measures how much oil it pumped up. And it sends it to an office at the side of the field. And ConocoPhillips tried to improve the method of working of these things. And what they did was something very neat. They installed not just 2 sensors, but 10 sensors. And they send out a data point not every day, but once every 60 seconds. And then they did something. So then they know all sorts of things about this machine, and they know it in real time. And what they did is they instructed each of these machines to do a very neat thing, is to be competitive and to be better than the guy next door. So what you get is you get a plunger lifter that knows exactly what it's doing, and it's producing 120 gallons of fuel per hour. But it realizes that the guy next door is doing 123. And it goes, damn, I want that. So it starts twisting the knobs and turns the calibration of the machine until it does 124. But obviously the guy next door will go like, I'm doing 123, I'm better than him. And then he sees the figure going up with his neighbor until it reaches 124, and he goes, shit. That was my idea. So he starts twisting his knobs and, changing settings and configuration until he does 125. Within 2 months, the field produced 30% more oil than it did before they installed the big data system. So they invented a system that told all of these individual wells to start being more effective than the guy next door. And they learned a lot about how to calibrate these machines in the field, because they figured it out by themselves, setting the settings to become more competitive than the rest. It's interesting because it turned the IT department for ConocoPhillips from a cost center to a profit center. And they're now on a target. That's interesting stuff. They're not just getting oil out of the wells, they're getting the data to make it better. And that is big data systems. So I'll save you the statistics. So it's an interesting case for big data because it improved the world of ConocoPhillips. It improved their business. But in my respect, or in my opinion, they did something very strange. They got this brand new technology that has lots of new capabilities, and they started using it to do what they already did, only better. The point that I'm trying to make in my book is that if you get big data, if you get this kind of technology, you should not be doing what you already did, but better. You shouldn't be using old processes using new technology, because that leads to expensive operations. For those of you who experienced the internet era, late 1990s, early 2000s, we know exactly what we meant by this. Old processes times new technology equals expensive operations. If you do what you already did with new and expensive technology, it's fun in the beginning, but you lose your competitive edge later on. So if you have new technology, you can try and discover new ways of working. So big data is useful for what I call a data-driven strategy. And a data-driven strategy is about creation of sustainable business value from data generated by your core business processes. It's doing what you already did, generating data as a result of that, and then encompassing that into new business models. Who of you, you already told me that you don't actually do something at Nedap. So do you get a paycheck? Who of you gets a paycheck? Okay. How many of them deserve one? All of them. Very good. There's a company called ADP. You know that you get your paychecks from ADP or not? Okay. There's a company in the world called ADP, and it processes over 600 million paychecks per year. That's an interesting thing. And companies actually hire them to do their paycheck processing for them. They just send them a bunch of data, and they print out the forms and mail them and register this with the tax administration, etc. But it's an interesting thought to have 600 million paychecks a year for people all around the world, because if you know what a forklift driver makes in Germany in January 2013, and you know what he makes in Holland in January 2013, and then you measure it month over month, you can actually see what the state of what the current state of the economy is for forklift drivers. And you can do that for people working in banks or people working in the steel industry or people working in farms. So by analyzing people's paychecks in that kind of volume, you can actually say something about the economy. And that's exactly what ADP does. They created a new company that they've given a very fancy name. It's called the ADP Research Institute. It's not a research institute. It's a commercial train that turns over roughly $100 million a year. They didn't want to tell me. And I called them up and said, I need your figures. They said, we're not giving it. We're a research institute. Don't you have a tiny bit of commerce in there? Yes, well, maybe. It's anywhere between $80 million and $120 million per year in revenue, just by analyzing people's paychecks, which they are being paid for by the customers who asked them to do that. They get this data, they analyze it, and they come up with a report. One thing is interesting, they come up with a report that's so specific. It's the United States quarterly industry state of the country, and the NASDAQ typically responds within 10 minutes of the publication of that report. That's how much data they have, and that's how well they are, how good they are at processing the data. Who of you owns one of these? TomTom in your car? And who of you likes to ski? Okay, that's the same people, is it? We'll find correlations later on. The reason why I ask you about the skiing and TomTom is because if you look at the stock figures for TomTom round about 2009, they very much resembled a black slope in skiing. They went down really fast. And that was because in 2008, TomTom sold 945,000 P&Ds, portable navigation devices. Anybody have any idea what the figure was in 2009? Wild guess, how many did they sell? 465,000. What would happen, Ruben, if your sales dropped by close to 50%? We're in deep shit. Though that's what they were. They were in very big trouble, is what we say. But somebody invented something at TomTom, or somebody had a brilliant idea and said, well, right about what we do now is we tell people where to go, but we don't tell people the quickest way to get there, only by distance of road, not by traveling time. But if we know where these people are, if we put a SIM card in each of these machines, we can tell from their telephone signals where they are, and we can actually predict how many cars are in a particular part of the road, and we could predict traffic jams. Because they couldn't get their hands, at that time, they couldn't get their hands on the data from the Rijkswaterstaat, the traffic administration. And they teamed up with Vodafone and set up a nice collaboration. And they found out something that they called HD traffic. And it was real-time traffic information on your TomTom, and it would actually guide you past the traffic jams onto the fastest route. Any subscribers here? Yep, there are. They set you back $14.95 a month. Actually, an annual subscription to that service was more expensive than the device. And it kept TomTom on the road, literally. The company's alive because of this. And they were generating data out of their primary process, and they found a nice way to product and package that data into a new service. And that's the reason why they're still alive today. And one of the nicest things is this machine. It's called the Samsung Galaxy NX. And it's a very interesting camera because it has a GPS sensor. Actually, it has two because it can measure where you're aiming or where you've been going. And it will track down where you are, what you're aiming your camera at, what you're taking a picture of. And then it will send that data back to the Samsung servers. There it will analyze what other people with your personal profile photographed in your neighborhood and put that information back on the back of the camera. So it will tell you, if you're now photographing the Tower of Pisa in Italy, then you might want to go 2 blocks down, 3rd Street on your right hand, there's a nice house that people with your profile typically like to photograph, so why don't you go over there? And it gets more interesting. It's the first American that was ever on the board of Samsung, is, by the way, a Korean-born man with the name of Young Sun. He got to the board and he started thinking of what can we do to outpace our competitors, and he figured data was the right way to go. He invented something called the Samsung Data Platform. It's not in operation yet, but they're working on it. This camera is one result of it. But what they also do, if you have a Samsung Smart TV, and more TVs have become smart, they generate data about what you are actually looking at. So I'm not sure if this is going to happen, but it would be really nice if you were watching Crime Scene CSI and they had an episode where somebody was killed in Italy and you were just taking pictures of the Tower of Pisa. Your camera was just, hey, you know that crime scene investigations thing that you just watched? It had the murder in Pisa. It's right around the corner. If you want to see where the murder happened, or if you want to see where maybe the corpse is still there, you could go and photograph it. That'd be good. So data-driven strategy is about creating sustainable value from data. And there are actually three things driving the importance of this right now. There are three developments around us that make that data is an ideal product for new, or an ideal substance for new products and services. And one of them is this. It's Bertha 7, where she was already mentioned by Hilbert. It's Bertha 7. And you know exactly how many sensors. So who's in livestock? Any people from livestock here? How many sensors typically on a cow? How many could you stuff in if you wanted to? 2 only. I spoke with people of TNO that did some research. That's actually where I got the example. They have 53. They were testing it, probably testing it out, I hope. So yeah, how many do you need? I'm seriously trying to think if they could tell the Dutch government what exactly was their purpose when they put the sensors in and started collecting data. Anyway, the cow is synonymous for the Internet of Things. We start stuffing stuff with sensors. So we measure everything. We measure whether or not you answer green or red. We measure the temperature through our phones. We measure movements. We measure everything. Our cars are stuffed with sensors. So we have a far bigger source of data, and it's real time. It's everywhere. It's location aware. And we have a connected economy. We have companies that are far more willing to share their data with other companies because they see that they can create value out of it. 10, 15 years ago, if you asked a company to share its data with you commercially, you were thought to be a freak. We're not going to do that. That's our competitive advantage. We're not going to share our data with you. Now, if you ask anyone in the street, do you think your company or your phone company would share its data with other companies, insurance companies, for instance? The answer would probably be yes. They're very, very willing to share data. And the audience, consumers like you and me, we're far more willing to share data as well. Anyone who says that he doesn't share his or her data and has a Facebook account is lying. He shares everything he knows about his life. Did you know that if you put a picture on Facebook, Facebook will scan your face, recognize it in other people's photos on Facebook, and they will connect the dots and plot your social network. So even if your face is in your picture in your friend's region, but other people upload photos with your face on it, Facebook will automatically detect your social network and place them in it. You don't have to do anything about that. So yes, we're sharing data whether we like it or not. And the third driver for change is mobility. It's not the fact that we all have a cell phone. That's nothing new. But it's the fact that we have a cell phone that allows us to send data but also receive it. And receive it in a way that makes the data that we get location aware. We have people walking in factories with iPads. You probably know all about that. People walking with iPads in factories that will give them just the information of the part of the factory that they're in. Not the entire factory, but just the location where they're at. I can assume that in farms, stuff like that happens. I work for a retailer that does e-commerce, and you can pick up these packages, and they will only identify. They can identify by the people that have logged on the pickup point. And the information will automatically display on their iPads. And that can happen in consumer products as well. So the fact that we have far more data through censoring, the fact that we have an economy around us that is far more willing to share information, and the fact that we can use and distribute that information everywhere, location aware, makes it very relevant for people to use data-driven products. So what I did in my book, I described 5 typical ways, typical business models of how companies can leverage that value, how they can create new products and services to make profit from that data. And I'm going to give you 3 examples. There are 5, but I'm going to give you 3. First of all, this is the business model canvas. Does anybody know this? Okay, it's a method of describing a business model, and I won't run you through it in a complete sense, but what it says is we would like to know who your customer is. We would like you to describe what the value is that you are offering this customer and how you get this value to this customer through logistics or through supply chain and through customer relationships. And all of that works out in a business model, how you make money off that, how your cash register rings. And then you have to undertake activities. You have to leverage assets, and you have partnerships, and all these cost money. And that's the bill that's presented here. So I've made a sort of simplified versions of these to show you how companies make money. And I'll just skip the ING example because of time. But Barclays, you know, ING said that they were going to, or at least the rumor had it, that ING was going to sell your personal data to the highest bidder, right? That's what we were all scared of. That really wasn't true. ING wasn't selling anything. They were just placing ads in your e-banking environment. Not even the paying customer would not even access your data. Barclays Bank in the UK is a whole different story. They're actually selling your data. They're actually doing what ING did. Nobody cared. It says something about the British, eh? Any Brits in the house? Okay. So Barclays did it, and they made a huge success. And what they did is they had a value proposition for customer group A. The value proposition is the bank account, your transaction system. You can send and receive money from other people. Through the activities that they undertook for the bank account service, they got a lot of data, and they could collect that data, for instance, in a report for a company like Media Market. And Media Market would ask the bank, can I get information on how many people that spend 100 euros at Media Market, how much money on average would they spend at competing retail outlets in electronics? And they would be anonymized, obviously, because Media Market is not interested in individual data, but in aggregated data. So within a particular region or within a particular age group, people that spend 100 euro at Media Market would on average spend 50 euros at BCC or ITS Electronics or whatever. And they would send that to customer group B, obviously, electronic retailers. Is that a clear example? All right, let's take it one step further. Let's go to the energy market. We already talked about smart meters. I'll tell you how smart they are. There is a smart German guy. For some reason, it's always the Germans that invent this kind of thing. He found out that on an electronic network, or on an electric network, if you turn on a device, it generates a spike in electricity usage. And the spike is unique for every individual device. It's called an electric fingerprint. So let's say you have a Bosch WM12. I have no idea what that is. It could be a drill, it could be a washing machine, it could be nothing. But let's say you have a Bosch WM12. If you turn it on and your smart meter registers the energy consumption, it could actually detect, you have a Bosch WM12. But then it can also detect that your Bosch WM12 will actually use 10% more electricity than a normal machine. And that's a sign that it's breaking down. I have to be very careful here because I know there are so many people in the room that know far more about this than I do. But I've been told that that's true. And it's very interesting for electricity companies to know what kind of devices and appliances you have in your house, how many you have, how often you use them, and when they're going to break down. Because electricity companies sell what? Electricity. And how does that smell? Does it have a nice color? Does it look any different from what the competitors are offering? No, it might be green or gray, but even that you don't see, and nobody actually trusts whether or not that's true. So it's called a commodity, and that's why we invented the commodity swap, because all commodity providers are looking for some way to make a unique product and proposition to get their customers to stay with them. They've tried marketing, but that's sort of not really worked out. So prices are dropping because price is now the only competing instrument. So they're all trying to find out new ways of leveraging budget. And they've created electricity as a product. They give it to your average consumer. He sends back through his smart meter all sorts of consumption data, and they try to recreate. There should be an arrow here. It's gone missing. But the arrow leads to a new proposition, which is the next. And I'm seriously discussing this with an electricity company in Holland. Why not sell people on a subscription basis all of the appliances that they need in their house with free electricity, but the electricity company decides what kind of device you get. So for $49.95, Essent or Nuon or Oxio or whoever will give you a washer-dryer, a fridge, an electric stove, a microwave, and everything, and your Bosch WM12 for $49.95 a month, and you get the electricity in for free. Why would they do that? Because that's the way that they can distinguish themselves from competition. That's the way that they can create higher margins. That's the way that they can get the right type of appliances in your house that use up the least electricity and give you the highest return in customer satisfaction. But they can only do this because of data, because of the data that they generate, sending out the electricity. So they need to keep selling you electricity, but they put something on top through data. I'm going to give you the last example of the three because I'm running out of time. It says here, time's up. Press Del to reset. Please don't. Escape to exit. Here's the third one, product innovation. The consumer, you, and the bank, again. So let's assume that we are the bank, and the bank has a transaction machine, the regular bank account, and it gets all of this banking data. Banks are also quickly becoming a commodity. Every bank account is the same. You don't smell it, you don't hear it, you don't feel it. It works the same as the other guy's bank. They just have a different marketing sauce over it. So banks are trying to do the same thing. They're trying to get extra value. And they found one in what they call the Consumer Household Report, or the statistics. Do you know these little graphs that say, well, this month you spent 140 euros on energy, or 120 euros on clothes, or in my case, 350 euros on shoes, and they're not mine. Although I am wearing a new pair for the first time in 10 years today. So, but they're giving you a household appliance or a household boekje. Anyone know what the English name is for that? A household administration system. So anything. The interesting thing is, if you buy something at Zalando, something interesting happens, because your bank knows that you bought something from Zalando, but it could be anything. It could be clothing, it could be shoes, it could be electronics. If it were Amazon, it could be books or jewelry, whatever. So the system, the household administration thing, will actually help you. The expenses tracker, that's what it's called. The expenses tracker will ask you, can you please tell me what this was? And you will say, well, it was $49.95 and it was shoes. And it will say, thank you very much. Now we know that. And all of a sudden, the bank is building consumer profiles. It's building expenses patterns for millions of customers who are using this. And all sorts of companies will be interested in having these. And they could actually tap into those consumer spending patterns. And they could also learn from that and send information back. So banks are quickly becoming gatherers of consumer profiles. Now, they're going to have a lot of legislative problems in actually selling that, but they're becoming far more effective. And it's not just banks. Other companies are actually trying to get to that data, because there are certain companies that will actually say, well, we don't relate to a bank, but you can import your banking data into our system because we have a far smarter expenses tracker. Yeah, they do. There are companies like NAB, although they are a bank, but they do the same thing. Movin in the US, a very big company. Mint.com is not related to any bank, doesn't provide banking services, but has spending patterns of millions and millions and millions of Americans. I believe they have something like 10% of Americans use Mint in some way. That's 45 million people. That's a very big box of spending patterns that you can use and sell to other people. But there's also Fidor Bank and Holfi, companies like that. One of the things that they can do is they can advise you, and they can say, look, you spent 140 euros on your energy bill, and you are mom and dad and two very pretty children in Utrecht. It's my family. And you could actually, there are other people with a similar family, just not that cute. Sorry, that was cheap. But other people with similar conditions actually only spend on average 110 euros. So you could save 30 euros a month. By the way, here's a nice offer from a new energy company. Or here are 2 or 3 offers competing, and you can choose. And they're actually doing this. It's called lead generation. This is happening. And this is what ING was up to. They were trying to gear up for this kind of services. They weren't actually doing this. I have to be very specific about this. What ING was trying to do was really, really harmless. But they are experimenting with how consumers like this kind of business model. So these companies are trying new business models. And I get a sign that I really have to stop now. I put 5 of these business models in my book, which you're all getting at the end of this presentation to take home and read. And I hope, sincerely, that you can find business models for the stuff that you produce at Nedap. Because I've been in this company for 3 times, and every single time I was impressed with the quality of your work, with the intensity with which you work on those products, but also with the potential for these products to generate far more data than you currently do, and to leverage that data into business models. I sincerely hope that you get the chance to build new business models and to find new ways of making money. Because the money, the answer to the question is, where's the money? It's right under your noses. It's in the products that you build and that you successfully sell to your customers. And I wish you good luck and success in leveraging that value. Thank you very much.